Hi friends, today we're going to be looking at another reason for why Babylon the Great was Jerusalem. And the reason today is going to be Babylon the Great was Jerusalem because she was the one who rode the beast in the book of Revelation. Babylon the Great was Jerusalem because Jerusalem rode the beast. And in order to show this, we will first need to identify who this beast was. And then we'll need to show how Jerusalem's relation to the beast was aptly pictured as a woman riding the beast. And I wanted to show off my shirt real quick before we get into the video. Babylon the Great was Jerusalem. Let's start by identifying who the beast was, and then we'll look at how Jerusalem rode the beast. Because Revelation describes this beast as rising out of the sea, and because Daniel 7 also describes beasts rising out of the sea, he's got 4 different beasts rising out of the sea. We can use Daniel 7 to help us understand what a beast is. Daniel 7's beasts are kingdoms, 4 kingdoms, 4 different successive world empires were pictured in Daniel's vision. This means Revelation's beast was also a world empire. The world empire at the time of writing was Rome. The woman is said to sit on the beast, but she is also said to sit on 7 hills. And Rome is famously called a city of 7 hills. So she's sitting on the beast, she's sitting on 7 hills. So that's helping us identify the beast is Rome. The woman is Jerusalem, but we're going to see later how she's riding Rome, as it were. The beast is said to have 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 heads are said to be 7 kings, and the 10 horns are also said to be 10 kings. So I have 2 different sets of kings. 10 kings have no kingdom as of yet, but are given authority to be kings with the beast for 1 hour. During this short time, these 10 kings will destroy Babylon the Great and burn her with fire. These 10 kings are probably either like Jewish generals or else kings of various surrounding nations that supplied auxiliary forces to aid Vespasian and Titus in the war against the Jews. The set of 7 kings, which included also an 8th, so that's another set. We had the 10. Now this is the set of 7, which included an 8th, who was of the 7, it says. These were in fact Caesars. The Caesar that received a mortal wound was Nero, who being declared a public enemy, and presumably he ended up committing suicide. This suicide sent the Roman Empire into a civil war, which, is pictured as the beast that has the mortal wound, right? But it says it was healed, and that's through the 8th. The 8th was Vespasian, and he returned stability to the empire, and Vespasian also would elect to continue the war against the Jews. He left his son Titus in charge of the army in Judea when he returned to Rome, I guess to be officially inaugurated as the Caesar. And it was Titus, who's the prince of the people that was to come, who would end up destroying the city and the sanctuary. The beast is also said to be worshipped by the world. Okay, the Revelation says all the world shall worship him, whose names are not written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And we know that Caesars were worshipped as part of the Roman Empire, part of their religious system. Wikipedia reads, the imperial cult was inseparable from that of Rome's official deities, whose cult was essential to Rome's survival and whose neglect was therefore treasonous. The development of Caesar worship started off as merely identifying a deceased Caesar as a god, and then living Caesars were viewed as sons of God. Wikipedia also reads, a deceased emperor held worthy of the honor could be voted a state divinity, divus, plural divi, by the Senate and elevated as such in an act of apotheosis. The granting of apotheosis served religious, political, and moral judgment on imperial rulers and allowed living emperors to associate themselves with a well-regarded lineage of imperial divi from which unpopular or unworthy predecessors were excluded. Caesars began to be worshipped more and more as gods while they were still alive. This was especially prevalent in the eastern part of the empire. Sacrifices were made to current ruling Caesars as to a god. This explains why Revelation says that all the world would worship the beast. All the world had to sacrifice to Caesar as to God, and to refuse to sacrifice to the emperor would result in capital punishment, or could result in that. Furthermore, the beast is said to make war with the saints and to overcome them in the book of Revelation. Well, we know that Nero, or it's understood, commonly accepted, that Nero blamed the fire of Rome on the Christians, and thus declared the Christians enemies of Rome. So in 64, he began persecuting the Christians. He made war with the saints and overcame them. Suetonius writes of Nero that during his direction, punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a class of men given to a new and mischievous superstition. Eusebius notes, Nero was the first of the emperors who showed himself an enemy of the divine religion. And Nero personified the beast. He was the seventh head. He would be the Caesar at the time of the beginning of the war with the Jews. He was the Caesar that would start the Christian persecution. He was also the one whose name, when using Hebrew gematria, would add up to 666. He even earned the nickname the Beast by his own people because of the horrendous animal-like acts he would engage in during his rule. Apollonius of Tyana, a contemporary of Nero, specifically mentions that Nero was called a beast. Let's see what he has to say. Moreover, in traversing more of the earth than any man yet has visited, I have seen a host of Arabian and Indian wild beasts. But as to this wild beast, which many call a tyrant, I know not either how many heads he has, or whether he has crooked talons and jagged teeth. In any case, though this monster is said to be a social beast and to inhabit the heart of cities, yet he is also much wilder and fiercer in his disposition than animals of the mountains and forests. And whereas you can sometimes tame and alter the character of lions and leopards by flattering them, this one is only roused to greater cruelty than before by those who stroke him, so that he rends and devours all alike. And again, there is no animal, anyhow, of which you can say that it ever devoured its own mother. Nero is gorged with such a heap of hunting spoils. So, Nero was a really bad character, and he was even called a beast by his own people. So to recap real quickly, the beast represented Rome as a world empire. The beast was personified in the Caesars, especially Nero. Nero's name added up to 666. Rome made war with the saints starting in 64 AD. Rome, with the help of auxiliary forces, burned Jerusalem with fire. That's the 10 horns will hate the whore and burn it with fire. Rome was the beast. Okay, so now let's look at how Jerusalem had a relationship with Rome that could be described as a woman riding a beast. If a soldier were to ride a destructive animal around, like an elephant or something, it would use that animal to destroy enemy soldiers. And that's how Jerusalem was using Rome. And it's my suspicion, which I can't back this up with any quotes right now or any direct evidence, but it's my suspicion that the Jews were behind Nero's decision to blame the Roman fire on the Christians. Can't prove that, but that's my suspicion. We find abundant examples, however, in the book of Acts of the Jews using the civil authorities to persecute the Christians. I would merely extrapolate from the examples listed in the book of Acts. So beginning at Jesus, the Jews used the Romans to kill the saints. We remember the high priest saying, "We have no king but Caesar." And when Pilate asked, "What shall I do with your king?" the Jews demanded that he crucify them. When the Romans saved Paul from the Jews at Jerusalem, they demanded of the Romans, saying, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live." They themselves persecuted the Christians, and they used the Roman government to persecute the Christians. There are some examples of them using the civil governments in the Roman Empire to persecute the Christians, and let's look at a few. First, from Acts 14:2 says, But the believing Jews stirred up the Gentiles and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. And when there was an assault made, both of the Gentiles and also of the Jews, with the rulers to use them despitefully and to stone them, but then of course Paul ends up escaping from them. And then in Acts chapter 17, verse 5 through 7, it reads, "But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out to the people. And when they had found them, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also, whom Jason hath received, and these all do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, one Jesus." And then in Acts 17:13, "But when the Jews at Thessalonica had knowledge that the word of God was preached of Paul at Berea, they came thither also and stirred up the people." So it's always the Jews using either the people or the local governments, whatever tools that they had, it means they had available, they would use to attack the Christians. So this is the pattern. The woman uses whoever's got destructive power to persecute the Christians. And in the case of the climax of the first century persecution against Christians, it would be Rome. Let's look at Acts 18:12 through 16. "And when Gallio was the deputy of Achaia, the Jews made insurrection with one accord against Paul, and brought him to the judgment seat, saying, This fellow persuadeth men to worship God contrary to the law. And when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, If it were a matter of wrong or wicked lewdness, O ye Jews, reason would that I should bear with you. But if it be a question of words and names and of your law, look ye to it, for I will be no judge in such matters. And he drave them from the judgment seat." So they're not always successful in their plots against the Christians and to use the government officials to carry out their evil plans. And we have the Jews in Damascus instigated the governor of Damascus to try to arrest and kill him. We have in Acts 9:22 and 23. "Saul increased the more in strength and confounded the Jews which dwelt in Damascus, proving that this is very Christ. And after that many days were fulfilled, the Jews took counsel to kill him." And then Paul relating this story in 2 Corinthians, that they used the local government to accomplish this, we have in 2 Corinthians 11:32-33. "In Damascus the governor under Aretas, the king, kept the city of the Damascenes with a garrison, desirous to apprehend me. And through a window in a basket I was let down by the wall and escaped his hands." So they're using, in this case, the civil authorities there in Damascus to try to get Paul arrested and persecuted. So we see a pattern of the Jews using Gentile authorities to persecute first Christ and then subsequently his followers. The Jews used the Romans to persecute the Christians. This is pictured in Revelation by a woman riding the beast. And there's one more thing that could be added, and that is that just as the woman has this close and intimate relationship with the beast that she sits on, pictured in Revelation, so the Jews also had a close and intimate relationship with the Romans. They had entered into an alliance with the Romans during the time of the Maccabees. And so let's look at a little bit of that history. Maccabees 8:1. "And Judas heard of the fame of the Romans, that they are powerful and strong, and that they willingly agree to all things that are asked of them, and that whoever was agreeable to them, they established a friendship with them. And so they are powerful and resourceful, and they heard of their battles and their successful works." And anyway, it goes on and on about the Romans and their virtues and why Judas wants to make an alliance with the Romans. And then in verse 17 we have, "And so Judas chose Eupolemus, the son of John, the son of Jacob, and Jason, the son of Eleazar, and sent them to Rome to make an agreement of friendship and an alliance with them, and so that they would take away from them the yoke of the Grecians, for they saw that they oppressed the kingdom of Israel with servitude. And they went to Rome, a very long journey, and they entered the Senate house, and they said, Judas Maccabeus and his brothers and the people of the Jews have sent us to you to establish with you an alliance and peace, and so that we may be registered among your associates and friends. And then about a century later, the Jews used their alliance with the Romans to ask the Romans to send an army to help one of the two parties of a civil war that was going on in the land of Israel at that time. They asked the Romans to come help mediate that, and one of the parties wanted, of course, Rome to side with their party and oust the other guy. And this kind of backfired because one of the parties of the Jews promised that the Jews would be servants to the Romans if they would help their party. And Pompey readily agreed, and as a consequence, the Jews became no longer merely friends of the Romans, but subservient to them. And let's look at that history from Josephon. It says, "He gave the kingdom to Hyrcanus and killed the supporters of Aristobulus. He took Aristobulus and bound him in chains to lead him to Rome. All the cities of Syria that the Judeans took in battle, he returned to them, that is, to the Syrians. And all the territory of the Hasmonean kings had conquered, Pompey returned to its inhabitants. And all the nations that were subdued to Jerusalem for ages, he freed them from being servants of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, mistress over the cities, became subject to Rome, and to the nation of Judah, a kingdom of priests was subjugated." And then he continues, "Thus spake Joseph Ben Gurion, saying, All this came upon us from the brothers Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, for they initiated this evil in Jerusalem, and we became slaves of Rome. Henceforth we sank from the greatness and became subdued." Okay, so in conclusion, we see that the woman Jerusalem initiated the alliance with Rome, used Rome to help free them from the Greeks, used Rome to help them in the Civil War, then used Rome to help kill Christ, and then the Christians, but then were finally destroyed by the very beast upon which they rode. I think it's pretty clear here from what we've looked at. I'm convinced, I hope you're a little bit persuaded, if not all the way persuaded, that the beast was Rome and the woman that rode the beast was Jerusalem. It's been almost a year since I posted my last video, and this is partly because I felt like this was the most complex and involved argument to make. And also I wanted to read Josephus first, but I still haven't got around to that. I've read a little bit of Josephon, but still have a lot of reading to do. And I got distracted in other things. Anyway, hope that helps in your efforts to identify who Babylon the Great was. God bless.